I never thought I would be the kind of woman who would stand in her own kitchen, staring at her husband and another woman, feeling absolutely nothing. Not rage, not tears, just a cold, crystalline clarity that cut through 12 years of marriage like a surgeon's scalpel through skin. My name is Victoria Hartwell, and 24 hours ago, my husband walked through our front door with his mistress and announced she would be moving in. He called it progressive. He called it honest. He said he loved us both and saw no reason why we couldn't all live together in harmony. He actually used the word harmony as if our marriage were some kind of experimental jazz composition where discordant notes somehow created beauty. I stood there in my red dress, the one he used to say made me look powerful, and I realized something profound. He was right about the dress. I did look powerful, and I was about to show him exactly what that meant. But let me back up, because this story doesn't start with his confession. It starts 3 weeks earlier, on a Tuesday afternoon that seemed utterly ordinary. Victoria had just won a major case for her firm, a corporate merger worth millions that had taken 8 months of meticulous preparation. She had walked out of the courtroom feeling invincible, her heels clicking against marble floors with the rhythm of victory. Her phone had buzzed with congratulations from colleagues, clients, partners. Robert Matthews, her mentor and senior partner, had taken her to lunch at an elegant restaurant downtown, toasting her success with sparkling water since they both had afternoon meetings. He was 62 years old, silver-haired and sharp as ever, the closest thing to a father figure Victoria had known since her own dad passed away when she was in law school. Robert had looked at her across the white tablecloth and said something that stuck with her. "You know what separates great lawyers from good ones, Victoria? Great lawyers see 3 moves ahead. They anticipate. They prepare for scenarios others haven't even imagined yet." She had smiled, thinking he was talking about litigation strategy. She didn't know she would need that advice for her personal life just weeks later. That evening, Victoria had come home to their beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place with tree-lined streets and neighbors who actually knew each other's names. The house was a modern colonial with white shutters and a garden that she maintained herself on weekends, finding something meditative about working with soil and watching things grow. Michael's car was already in the driveway when she arrived, which was unusual. He typically worked late, often not coming home until 8 or 9 in the evening. His family's manufacturing business demanded long hours, or so he always said. She had found him in his study, supposedly reviewing quarterly reports, but his laptop screen went dark the moment she entered. A small thing, a tiny gesture that her lawyer's brain catalogued and filed away without conscious thought. He had kissed her cheek distractedly, asked about her day in that tone people use when they're not really listening, and she had felt it. Something was off. Not dramatically wrong, not yet, but off in the way milk smells just before it turns completely sour. She had mentioned her courtroom victory, and he had said, "That's great, honey," while scrolling through his phone. And she had gone upstairs to change, telling herself she was being paranoid, that 12 years of marriage naturally led to some emotional distance, that this was normal. Normal. That word had become her enemy over the past year. When had their conversations become transactional exchanges of information rather than actual communication? When had he stopped really looking at her? When had she stopped expecting him to? Victoria had built a career on asking the right questions, on digging until she found truth. But somehow, she had failed to interrogate her own marriage with the same rigor. Or maybe, she thought later, she simply hadn't wanted to know the answers. The signs had been there for months if she was honest with herself. The way Michael had started going to the gym 5 days a week after years of sedentary living. The new cologne that showed up in their bathroom, expensive and musky. Nothing like the crisp scent he had worn throughout their marriage. The mysterious late-night phone calls he took in his car in the driveway, sitting there for 20 or 30 minutes before coming inside. Victoria had noticed all of it, had felt the small stabs of suspicion, but she had pushed them down, focusing instead on briefs and depositions and billable hours. Work was concrete. Work made sense. Work didn't require her to confront the possibility that her marriage might be dissolving while she won cases and built her reputation. 2 weeks before the announcement, Victoria had done something she never thought she would do. She had followed him. Not physically, not like some desperate character in a movie, but digitally. She had access to their phone records through their shared account, and one night while Michael was in the shower, she had looked, really looked, and there it was. Hundreds of calls and texts to a single number over the past 6 months. Hours and hours of communication. She had sat there on their bed, the phone in her hand feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds, and she had made a choice. She didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, she did what any good lawyer would do. She started building her case. Victoria had hired a private investigator, a woman named Sarah Mitchell, who came highly recommended by a divorce attorney friend. Sarah was efficient and discreet, and within a week, Victoria had photographs. Michael and a young woman, Amanda Pierce, 29 years old, worked in marketing at his company. They were having lunch together, leaving work together, entering a hotel together. The evidence was damning and comprehensive, and Victoria had looked at it all with that same cold clarity that would serve her so well later. She felt hurt, of course she did, but beneath the hurt was something else. Anger, yes, but also a kind of clinical interest in what came next. How would he handle this? What would he say when confronted? She had planned to confront him on a Saturday morning, had actually rehearsed what she would say, how she would present the evidence, what ultimatums she would deliver. But Michael had beaten her to it. He had come home that Friday evening, the one that would change everything, and he hadn't even tried to hide it. He had walked through the front door with Amanda Pierce beside him, both of them carrying overnight bags, and he had looked at Victoria with something that resembled nervous excitement, like a child presenting a questionable art project to a parent. "Victoria, we need to talk," he had said. And those 4 words, so common in their banality, had shifted her entire world on its axis. She had been standing in the kitchen, having just gotten home herself from a long day at the office. Still in her red dress and heels, still carrying her leather briefcase, still very much in lawyer mode. She had looked at Amanda, really looked at her for the first time beyond the surveillance photographs. The girl was pretty in that fresh-faced way young women often are, with long blonde hair and wide blue eyes that currently looked terrified. Good, Victoria had thought. She should be terrified. "This is Amanda," Michael had continued, as if Victoria didn't already know exactly who Amanda Pierce was, down to her college GPA and her student loan debt. "I know this is going to sound strange, but I need you to hear me out. I love you, Victoria. I really do. But I also have feelings for Amanda, strong feelings. And I've been doing a lot of reading about alternative relationship structures, and I think we could make this work, the 3 of us, together." Victoria had stood very still, her mind processing this information with the speed and efficiency of a computer running complex calculations. He wasn't asking for a divorce. He was asking for permission to have both of them. He wanted his successful, accomplished wife, who looked good at business dinners and could hold her own in any conversation. And he wanted his young, adoring mistress who probably laughed at all his jokes and made him feel vital and desired. He wanted everything. "You want me to agree to this?" Victoria had said, her voice perfectly level. Not a question, a statement. "I think if we're all honest and open, this could actually strengthen our relationships," Michael had said, and Victoria had recognized the language. He had been reading articles, probably on some forum for entitled men who wanted to have their cake and eat it too. "Monogamy is just a social construct, Victoria. We've evolved beyond that." Amanda had stood there looking increasingly uncomfortable, shifting her weight from foot to foot. clearly not expecting this conversation to happen quite like this. Victoria had wondered how Michael had sold her on this plan. What promises had he made? What future had he painted? "How long has this been going on?" Victoria had asked. 6 months, Michael had admitted. "But Victoria, I never stopped loving you. This isn't about you not being enough. It's about me having the capacity to love more than one person. The capacity to love. As if love were a resource to be managed and optimized, like a stock portfolio or a business strategy." Victoria had felt something shift inside her then, something fundamental. The hurt was still there, sharp and real, but it was being rapidly overtaken by something else. A plan was forming in her mind, elegant in its simplicity, devastating in its execution. "I need time to think about this," she had said finally. "This is a lot to process." Michael had looked relieved, actually relieved, as if he had expected her to scream or cry or throw things. He didn't understand yet that Victoria was far more dangerous when she was calm. "Take all the time you need," he had said magnanimously, as if he were doing her a favor by turning her life upside down. "Amanda can stay in the guest room tonight while you think things over." And that's when Victoria had smiled. Not a warm smile, not a friendly smile, but a smile nonetheless. "Actually," she had said, "I think I'd like to try this. Starting right now, Amanda can move into the master bedroom with us. If we're doing this, we should do it properly, don't you think?" The look on Michael's face had been worth everything. Confusion mixed with triumph, mixed with something that might have been fear. Amanda had gone pale. But Victoria had kept smiling that cool, controlled smile, and she had picked up her briefcase and walked upstairs, her heels clicking on the hardwood with absolute certainty. She had 24 hours, she had calculated, 24 hours to show Michael exactly what he had asked for. 24 hours to make him regret every single decision that had led to this moment, and she was going to use every single minute. Victoria stood in her walk-in closet, the door closed behind her, and allowed herself exactly 60 seconds to feel everything. The betrayal, sharp and hot in her chest. The humiliation of having another woman brought into her home like some kind of acquisition. The rage that made her hands shake slightly as she unbuttoned her dress. 60 seconds. She counted them down in her head, breathing deeply, letting the emotions wash over her, and then recede like a wave pulling back from shore. When the minute was up, she straightened her shoulders, selected a comfortable pair of black pants and a crisp white blouse, and began to plan. The first rule of any legal strategy was to understand your opponent's weaknesses. Michael's weakness was his ego. He genuinely believed he was being progressive and enlightened, that he had evolved beyond conventional morality. He had convinced himself that this arrangement was about love and honesty, not about his midlife crisis and his need to feel desirable. He expected her to either refuse outright, which would make him the victim of her close-mindedness, or to reluctantly agree after days of negotiation, which would let him feel magnanimous and patient. He did not expect her to agree immediately and enthusiastically. That was her first advantage. The second weakness was Amanda. The girl was 29, young enough to still believe that love conquered all, that passion justified questionable decisions. She had probably convinced herself that Michael was going to leave Victoria eventually, that she was special, that their connection was worth the moral complications. Having to actually face the wife, to live in her house, to share a bedroom, that would shatter whatever romantic delusions she had constructed. Victoria didn't hate Amanda. Not really. The girl was just another victim of Michael's selfishness, even if she didn't know it yet. Victoria descended the stairs to find Michael and Amanda standing awkwardly in the living room, both looking uncertain about what came next. "I've been thinking," Victoria said brightly, her voice warm and welcoming, in a way that made Michael's eyes narrow with suspicion. "If we're going to do this, we should establish some ground rules. Communication is key in any relationship. Isn't that right, Michael? Absolutely, he said cautiously. So let's start with honesty. Amanda, how long have you been in love with my husband? Amanda's face flushed red. We didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. Things just happen, Victoria repeated thoughtfully, like earthquakes or car accidents, completely beyond anyone's control. She moved to the kitchen, pulling out wine glasses. Would you like some wine, Amanda? Or are you more of a beer person? I want you to feel comfortable here. This is your home now, too, after all. Michael was watching her carefully now, trying to figure out what game she was playing. Good. Let him wonder. Victoria poured 3 glasses of expensive red wine, a bottle from their collection that Michael had been saving for a special occasion. Well, this certainly qualified. To new beginnings, she toasted, raising her glass. And to honesty. Michael, why don't you tell me about your first date with Amanda? I'd love to hear all the details. The next hour was exquisite torture, and Victoria orchestrated it like a symphony. She asked questions with genuine seeming interest, forcing Michael to recount the progression of his affair while sitting in the home he shared with his wife. Where did you go for your first kiss? What did you talk about? When did you first tell her you loved her? Amanda grew increasingly uncomfortable, her answers becoming shorter and quieter. Michael tried to frame everything in the language of inevitability and emotion, but stripped of secrecy and excitement. The affair sounded exactly like what it was, a middle-aged man pursuing a younger woman who worked for him. This is fascinating, Victoria said, when Michael mentioned taking Amanda to a hotel downtown. That's the Riverside Inn, isn't it? Room 314. I know because I have the credit card statements. You stayed there 7 times over the past 4 months. That's almost $2,000 in hotel rooms, Michael. I hope the experience was worth it. The color drained from Michael's face. You knew? Of course I knew. I'm a lawyer, darling. I notice things. I investigate. I gather evidence. She took a sip of wine. I've known for 2 weeks. I hired a private investigator. I have photographs, phone records, witness statements. I could have filed for divorce already. But then you came home with this interesting proposal, and I thought, why not see where this goes? Amanda stood abruptly. I should leave. This is clearly not going to work. Sit down, Amanda, Victoria said, her voice still pleasant, but with an edge of steel that made the younger woman obey instantly. You wanted to be part of this relationship. You pursued a married man. You knew he had a wife. You don't get to run away now just because it's uncomfortable. Michael promised you something, didn't he? A life together? A future? Well, here's your future. Here's what it looks like when you're the other woman who thought she was special. Victoria, that's not fair, Michael interjected. We agreed to try this. Oh, we're trying it, Victoria assured him. I'm completely committed to the next 24 hours. In fact, let me show you just how committed I am. Amanda, let's go upstairs and get you settled in our bedroom. I'll show you where everything is. We can move some of Michael's things to make room for your clothes. This is going to be so much fun. She led them both upstairs to the master bedroom, a spacious room with a king-size bed and elegant furnishings that Victoria had carefully selected over the years. Now, let's think about sleeping arrangements, she said cheerfully. Michael, you usually sleep on the left side. I sleep on the right. Amanda, where would you like to sleep? In the middle? Or should we rotate positions each night to keep things fair? Amanda looked like she might cry. I can't do this. Sure you can, Victoria said. This is what you wanted, isn't it? To be with Michael? Well, here he is. Here we all are. One big happy family. She opened her closet. We can make room for your things right here. I'll move my winter clothes to the guest room closet. And we should definitely coordinate our wardrobes. We don't want to show up to events wearing the same thing. That would be awkward. Michael was starting to understand that he had made a terrible miscalculation. Maybe we're moving too fast. Maybe Amanda should stay in the guest room tonight after all, just until we all adjust. Absolutely not, Victoria said firmly. You said you wanted honesty and openness. You said monogamy was just a social construct. You said you had the capacity to love both of us. So let's live that truth. Let's be completely transparent. In fact, I think we should set up a shared calendar for Michael's time. How many nights a week were you planning to spend with Amanda versus with me? Should we alternate? Or maybe you could spend Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays with her, and Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays with me. Sundays we could all spend together. Family day. She was watching Amanda's face crumble, watching the reality of the situation destroy whatever fantasy the young woman had constructed. This wasn't romance. This wasn't a passionate love affair. This was messy and complicated and deeply uncomfortable, and they were only 2 hours into it. I need some air, Amanda said quietly, and she walked out of the bedroom. They heard her footsteps on the stairs, heard the front door open and close. Michael turned to Victoria, and for the first time she saw real fear in his eyes. What are you doing? I'm giving you exactly what you asked for, she said simply. You wanted both of us. You wanted this arrangement. I'm just making sure we do it right. You're trying to drive her away. Am I? I'm being nothing but welcoming. I'm making room for her in our home, in our bed, in our life. If she can't handle it, maybe that says something about the viability of this whole arrangement, don't you think? Michael ran his hands through his hair, a gesture Victoria recognized from 12 years of marriage. He did it when he was frustrated, when things weren't going according to plan. This isn't what I wanted. No? Then what did you want, Michael? Did you want me to quietly accept that you're sleeping with a woman 11 years younger than me? Did you want me to give you permission to have your affair with my blessing so you wouldn't have to feel guilty? Did you want to keep your stable, successful wife at home while you had exciting adventures with your girlfriend? Victoria's voice was still calm, but now there was something deadly in it. You wanted to have everything without consequences. You wanted to rewrite the rules of our marriage without my input. You wanted me to just accept this. I love her, Michael said, and it was probably the first honest thing he had said all evening. You love how she makes you feel, Victoria corrected. You love being wanted by someone young and pretty. You love the excitement of sneaking around. You love having someone who looks at you like you're special. But love, real love, that's what we had before you destroyed it. Love is the 12 years I spent building a life with you. Love is coming home after winning the biggest case of my career and wanting to tell you about it first. Love is the garden I planted because you mentioned once that you liked roses. Love is 1,000 small choices to put someone else's happiness alongside your own. She walked to the window, looking out at the darkening street. You threw that away for 6 months of hotel rooms and secret texts. And now you want me to pretend that's noble? That's evolved? No, Michael. What you did is the oldest story in the world. Husband gets bored. Husband finds younger woman. Husband thinks he deserves both. There's nothing progressive about it. It's just selfish. So what happens now? Michael asked quietly. Victoria turned back to him, and her smile was sad and knowing. Now we see how the next 24 hours play out. Amanda will either come back or she won't. If she comes back, we'll continue this experiment you proposed. I'll be the perfect wife, sharing my home and my husband with grace and maturity. I'll show you exactly what you asked for until you realize how fundamentally broken this idea is. And if she doesn't come back, well, then you'll know that what you had with her couldn't survive even one evening of reality. And us? Michael asked. What about us? I think you killed us when you walked through that door with another woman and asked me to accept it, Victoria said softly. But I'm willing to let you figure that out for yourself. They stood there in their bedroom, 12 years of marriage hanging in the air between them like smoke. Victoria could see Michael trying to find a way back, trying to find the words that would undo the damage. But there were no such words. Some things, once broken, couldn't be repaired. They could only be acknowledged and mourned. The front door opened downstairs. Amanda had come back. Victoria heard her tentative footsteps in the hallway, heard her pause at the bottom of the stairs. "Well," Victoria said brightly, her mask sliding back into place. "Our guest has returned. Let's go see if she's ready to try this again, shall we?" Amanda was standing in the foyer, her face blotchy from crying, her hands twisting together nervously. She looked up as Victoria and Michael descended the stairs, and Victoria could see the girl had been sitting in her car, probably calling a friend, probably questioning every decision that had led her to this moment. Good. Doubt was healthy. Doubt meant the fantasy was cracking. "I'm sorry," Amanda said, her voice small. "I just needed a minute. This is all very overwhelming." "Of course it is," Victoria said warmly, moving toward her with the grace of a hostess welcoming a guest. "This is a big adjustment for all of us. Why don't we order some dinner? I'm starving, and I'm sure you must be too. What do you like, Amanda? Italian? Chinese? We could order from that new Thai place downtown. Michael loves their curry." The casual domesticity of the suggestion seemed to throw Amanda off balance again. She had probably expected confrontation, drama, the wronged wife screaming and throwing things. Instead, she was getting calm competence and dinner suggestions. Anything is fine." "Thai it is then," Victoria decided, pulling out her phone. "Michael, you want your usual? The red curry with chicken? Amanda, are you vegetarian? Do you have any allergies I should know about? If we're going to be living together, I should know these things." They ended up in the dining room, sitting around the table that Victoria had found at an estate sale 7 years ago, a beautiful piece of mahogany that she had refinished herself. The food arrived 20 minutes later, and Victoria set the table with her good dishes, the ones reserved for special occasions. If they were going to do this, she would do it properly. She would show them exactly what this arrangement looked like in the harsh light of reality. "So, Amanda," Victoria said as she spooned pad thai onto her plate, "tell me about yourself. Where did you grow up? What made you want to work in marketing?" Amanda picked at her food, clearly not hungry. "I grew up in a small town about 3 hours from here. Got my degree in communications from State University. Started at Michael's company about 8 months ago as a junior marketing associate." 8 months ago?" Victoria repeated thoughtfully. "And you and Michael started your relationship 6 months ago. So you worked there for 2 months before things became romantic. Tell me, how did it start? I'm genuinely curious about the progression." Michael shot her a warning look, but Victoria ignored him. Amanda shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "We worked on a project together, a rebranding initiative for one of the product lines. We spent a lot of late nights at the office, and we just connected. He understood me. He listened to me. He made me feel valued." "He's good at that," Victoria agreed. "Making people feel valued. It's one of his strengths. He made me feel incredibly valued when we first met, too. I was in my second year of law school, working part-time at a coffee shop to pay my tuition. He came in every morning for his coffee, and he always asked about my day, about my classes, about my dreams. He was the first person who made me believe I could actually make it as a lawyer." She took a bite of her curry, letting the words hang in the air. "Of course, back then he was working for his father, learning the business. He wasn't the successful entrepreneur yet. I supported him through that transition. When his father got sick, I was the one sitting with him in hospital waiting rooms. When he was trying to decide whether to modernize the company or keep doing things the old way, I was the one helping him think through the options. I believed in him when he was still figuring out who he wanted to be." "Victoria," Michael said quietly, but she continued as if he hadn't spoken. "And then his father died, 3 years into our marriage, and Michael inherited everything. The business, the money, the house we're sitting in right now, and I was happy for him. Genuinely happy. I threw myself into my own career so he could focus on his. I worked 70-hour weeks building my practice so that he wouldn't feel pressure to be the sole provider. I wanted us to be partners, equals. She looked directly at Amanda. But somewhere along the way, Michael decided that wasn't enough. That I wasn't enough. That he needed something I couldn't provide. And maybe he's right. Maybe I can't compete with the excitement of a new relationship, with someone who doesn't know all his flaws yet, who hasn't seen him at his worst. That's not fair, Michael said. This isn't about you not being enough. I told you that. Then what is it about? Victoria asked, and for the first time that evening, there was real pain in her voice. Explain it to me, Michael. Make me understand why 12 years of partnership wasn't worth protecting. Why you had to bring someone else into our marriage without even discussing it with me first. I tried to talk to you, Michael said, his own frustration showing now. But you're always working, always at the office or bringing work home. When was the last time we had a real conversation that wasn't about schedules or bills or whose turn it was to pick up the dry cleaning? So, this is my fault? Victoria's voice rose slightly. Because I was working to build a career? Because I wasn't paying enough attention to you? That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you're blaming me for your decision to have an affair. Amanda stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I can't do this. I can't sit here and listen to you two fight about your marriage while I'm supposed to just be okay with being the other woman. This is insane. This whole thing is insane. Sit down, Amanda, Victoria said, her voice sharp. You wanted to be part of this relationship. You knew Michael was married. You still pursued him. You don't get to play the victim now. I'm not playing anything, Amanda shot back, and there was finally some fire in her voice. I fell in love with him. I didn't plan it. I didn't want to hurt anyone. But I can't help how I feel. Feelings don't justify actions, Victoria said coldly. I feel like throwing my wine in your face right now, but I'm not going to do it because that would be inappropriate. We all feel lots of things. Mature adults learn to control themselves. That's enough, Michael said, standing up. Both of you, just stop. This isn't working. Amanda, maybe Victoria's right. Maybe you should stay in the guest room tonight. We can talk about this more tomorrow when everyone's calmer. No, Victoria said firmly. We agreed to try this. We're trying it. Amanda stays in our bedroom or she leaves entirely. Those are the options, Michael. You wanted both of us. You wanted this arrangement, so we're doing it your way. She stood and walked toward the stairs. I'm going to get ready for bed. You two figure out what you want to do. But just so we're clear, if Amanda leaves now, she doesn't come back. If she stays, we do this properly. All three of us in that bedroom, facing exactly what you proposed. Victoria climbed the stairs with measured steps, her heart pounding but her expression perfectly controlled. She could hear Michael and Amanda talking in urgent, hushed voices below, but she didn't try to listen. It didn't matter what they said. The situation was already destroying itself. She had simply accelerated the inevitable. In the master bathroom, Victoria removed her makeup carefully, going through her nightly routine with the same precision she brought to everything. Cleanser, toner, serum, moisturizer, each step deliberate and calming. She changed into her pajamas, silk pants, and a matching top, elegant even in sleep. She had always believed that how you presented yourself mattered, even in private moments. She was sitting up in bed, reading a legal brief on her tablet, when Michael and Amanda finally came upstairs. They both looked exhausted, emotionally wrung out. Amanda was carrying a small overnight bag, and she kept her eyes on the floor as they entered the bedroom. We're going to try this, Michael announced, as if he were declaring something brave and bold. We're going to make this work. Wonderful, Victoria said, without looking up from her tablet. Amanda, there are fresh towels in the bathroom cabinet if you want to shower. The water pressure is better if you turn the left handle more than the right. Michael can show you. She watched Amanda disappear into the bathroom, watched Michael hover uncertainly by the bed. This is what you wanted, she reminded him softly. Your dream come true. Two women who both want you. How does it feel? Stop it, Michael said. "Just stop. I know what you're doing." "I'm not doing anything except agreeing to your proposal. You're the one who's uncomfortable." "Why is that, Michael? Is it possible that this arrangement sounds better in theory than in practice? That having your wife and your mistress in the same room removes all the excitement and taboo that made the affair thrilling in the first place?" Michael sat down heavily on his side of the bed. "I thought you loved me enough to at least try to understand." "I did love you," Victoria said quietly, finally looking at him. "I loved you enough to build a life with you, to stand beside you through everything, to be your partner in every sense of the word. But you didn't love me enough to do the same. You loved yourself more. You loved your own desires, your own needs, your own ego more than you loved our marriage. That's not true, isn't it? Because a man who loved his wife, who valued his marriage, would have come to her when he was feeling disconnected, would have suggested counseling, would have worked on the relationship. He wouldn't have sought comfort in someone else's bed, and then expected his wife to accept it. The bathroom door opened, and Amanda emerged wearing an oversized t-shirt and shorts, her face scrubbed clean of makeup. She looked younger without it, vulnerable and uncertain. She looked at the bed, at Michael on one side and Victoria on the other, and something crumbled in her expression. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I'm sorry, Michael. I thought I could, but I can't. This isn't love. This isn't what I wanted." "Amanda, please," Michael started, but she was already grabbing her bag. "She's right," Amanda said, gesturing to Victoria. "I knew you were married. I told myself it didn't matter, that what we had was special, that you were going to leave her eventually. But you weren't, were you? You wanted to keep her and have me too, and I let myself believe that was romantic, instead of seeing it for what it really was." She walked to the door, then turned back one more time. "I'm sorry, Victoria, for all of it. I was selfish and stupid, and I let myself believe a fantasy. I hope you can forgive me someday." "I already have," Victoria said, and meant it. "You're not the villain here, Amanda. You're just young and made a mistake. Learn from it." Amanda left, and they heard her footsteps on the stairs, heard the front door close with a finality that echoed through the house. Michael sat there on the bed, his head in his hands, and Victoria felt a strange mixture of triumph and sorrow. She had won. She had shown him exactly what his proposal really meant. But winning felt hollow when the prize was a broken marriage. "She's gone," Michael said unnecessarily. "Yes," Victoria agreed. "But we both know that's not really the problem, is it? The problem isn't Amanda. The problem is that you were willing to betray our marriage in the first place. The problem is that when you felt disconnected, your solution was to find someone else instead of working on what we had. The problem is that you brought another woman into our home and expected me to accept it." She closed her tablet and set it on her nightstand. "I gave you 24 hours, Michael. Actually, I gave you less than 8. And in that time, your perfect arrangement fell apart because it was never viable to begin with. You wanted permission to have an affair without guilt. You wanted to keep all the benefits of marriage while pursuing someone else. And when I called your bluff, when I showed you what that actually looked like in reality, you couldn't handle it. Neither could she. So what happens now?" Michael asked, the same question he had asked earlier. Victoria looked at him. This man she had loved for 12 years, this man who had just revealed himself to be someone she didn't respect anymore. "Now, you sleep in the guest room. Tomorrow we talk about lawyers." Michael didn't move immediately. He sat there on the edge of their bed, his shoulders slumped, looking older than his 41 years. Victoria wondered if this was the first time he had truly understood the consequences of his actions, or if he was still hoping for some miraculous reversal, some way to undo the damage. She felt nothing but a distant pity for him, the kind of emotion you might feel for a stranger who had made poor choices. "Victoria, please," he said finally, "can't we just talk about this? Really talk, without the games and the manipulation?" "Manipulation?" Victoria's eyebrows rose. You brought your mistress into our home and asked me to share you with her. I agreed. I gave you exactly what you asked for. If that felt like manipulation, perhaps you should consider why the reality of your proposal was so uncomfortable. You knew it would fall apart. You planned for it to fail. I planned nothing. I simply participated honestly in the arrangement you suggested. If it failed, it's because the arrangement itself was fundamentally flawed. She adjusted her pillows, settling back against the headboard. But you're right that we should talk. Really talk. So let's start with the truth. When did you stop loving me, Michael? When did you decide that our marriage wasn't worth fighting for? I never stopped loving you. Don't lie. Not now. Not after everything. Victoria's voice was tired but firm. You don't love someone and betray them the way you betrayed me. You don't love someone and bring another woman into their home. You don't love someone and expect them to simply accept being treated as less than they deserve. So when did it happen? When did I become insufficient? Michael was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. It wasn't you. It was me. I felt invisible. You were so focused on your career, on your cases, on building your firm, and I was proud of you. I really was. But somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like I mattered to you. Like I was just part of your routine, like checking items off a list. Wake up, coffee, work, dinner, sleep, repeat. When did we stop really seeing each other? Victoria absorbed this, acknowledging the grain of truth in his words, even as she recognized the self-serving nature of his complaint. So, instead of talking to me about feeling neglected, instead of suggesting we make changes or seek counseling, you decided to find validation elsewhere. You made a choice to step outside our marriage, rather than working to improve it. I didn't plan for it to happen. I didn't wake up one day and decide to have an affair. But you didn't stop it either. The first time you and Amanda had a conversation that crossed professional boundaries, you could have pulled back. The first time you felt attracted to her, you could have recognized that as a warning sign about our marriage and addressed it with me. Instead, you pursued it. You chose it. Every text message, every secret meeting, every lie you told me about working late, those were all choices you made. Michael stood and walked to the window, the same window Victoria had stood at earlier that evening. The street outside was dark now, quiet and still, the kind of peaceful suburban night they had shared for years. I was lonely, he said. Even when we were in the same room, I was lonely. And Amanda made me feel seen again. She laughed at my jokes. She was interested in what I had to say. She made me feel alive. She made you feel desired, Victoria corrected. There's a difference. She's 29 years old, Michael. She's at a completely different life stage. Of course, she was impressed by you. You're older, established, her boss. You held power over her career. That dynamic is intoxicating, but it's not sustainable. It's not real partnership. It felt real. I'm sure it did. Fantasies always feel real until you try to live them. Victoria pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. Do you want to know what the worst part is? It's not even the affair itself. People make mistakes. People get weak. The worst part is that you thought so little of me, that you believed I would accept this arrangement, that you could ask me to share you, and I would just go along with it. Because what? Because I'm supposed to be grateful you're being honest now? Because I should be enlightened enough to overcome my outdated belief in monogamy? I thought we could evolve beyond traditional relationship structures. No, you thought you could have everything you wanted without consequences. You thought you could keep your stable home life and your exciting affair. You thought you deserved both. And when I agreed, when I removed all the secrecy and taboo, you discovered that what you actually wanted wasn't the relationship itself, but the thrill of having something forbidden. Michael turned from the window, and there were tears in his eyes. I've ruined everything, haven't I? Yes, Victoria said simply. You have. Is there any way to fix this? Any chance at all? Victoria considered the question seriously, looking at this man she had spent 12 years with, this man who had once been her best friend and partner. Could she forgive him? Perhaps, eventually. Could she trust him again? That seemed infinitely more difficult. Could she continue to be married to someone who had demonstrated such poor judgment and such fundamental disrespect for their partnership? That question answered itself. "I don't think so," she said quietly. "I think too much has been broken. Trust isn't something you can just repair with apologies and promises. It's built over years through consistent actions, and you've demolished it in 6 months. Every time I look at you now, I'm going to remember that you chose someone else over our marriage. Every time you're late coming home, I'm going to wonder if you're being honest. Every time you look at your phone, I'm going to question who you're texting. That's not a marriage, Michael. That's a prison. So we're done? Just like that? 12 years, and we're finished? Not just like that. You finished us when you started seeing Amanda. I'm just acknowledging what you already did." Victoria uncurled herself from the bed and stood, walking to her dresser. She pulled out a business card from the top drawer and handed it to Michael. "This is Sarah Mitchell. She's a private investigator. I hired her 2 weeks ago. She has documentation of your affair, photographs, hotel receipts, witness statements, everything you would need to know about what I know." Michael stared at the card in disbelief. "You've been planning this. I've been protecting myself. There's a difference. I'm a lawyer, Michael. I know how divorces work. I know that being prepared makes the process cleaner and faster. I wasn't planning to use any of this. I was hoping that I was wrong, that there was some other explanation. But then you walked through that door with Amanda, and you made the decision for both of us. You could have confronted me 2 weeks ago when you found out. I could have, but I wanted to see what you would do. I wanted to give you the chance to come to me yourself, to tell me the truth before I had to drag it out of you. You failed that test spectacularly." Victoria sat back down on the bed, suddenly exhausted. "Guest room, Michael. Please, I can't do this anymore tonight." He stood there for another moment, holding the business card, looking lost and broken. Part of Victoria wanted to comfort him, the part that remembered loving him, the part that had spent 12 years caring about his well-being. But that part was smaller now, quieter, overwhelmed by the part that knew she deserved better than this. "I'm sorry," he said. "For whatever it's worth, I really am sorry. I know you are. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry your plan didn't work. You're sorry you're facing consequences. But are you sorry you did it in the first place? Are you sorry you hurt me? I don't think you are. I think you're just sorry it didn't work out the way you wanted." Michael left without another word, and Victoria listened to his footsteps in the hallway, heard the guest room door close. Then she was alone in the master bedroom, in the bed she had shared with him for 12 years, and she allowed herself to cry. Not dramatic sobs, not the kind of crying that shook her whole body, just quiet tears that slipped down her cheeks as she acknowledged everything she had lost. Not just a husband, but the future she had imagined. The children they had talked about having someday when her career was more established. The retirement they had planned, traveling to all the places they wanted to see. The simple comfort of having a partner, someone who knew her completely and chose her anyway. Except he hadn't chosen her. He had chosen himself. And that was the truth she had to accept. Victoria cried for 20 minutes, allowing herself that time to grieve. Then she washed her face, brushed her teeth, and got into bed. Tomorrow she would call her lawyer. Tomorrow she would begin the process of separating her life from Michael's. Tomorrow she would start figuring out what came next. But tonight she would sleep in her own bed, in her own home, with the satisfaction of knowing that she had handled this situation with dignity and strength. She had given Michael exactly what he asked for, and in doing so, she had shown him the emptiness of his desire. She had called his bluff and won. It was a hollow victory, but it was still a victory. The house was quiet around her, peaceful in a way it hadn't been in months. No more wondering where Michael was. No more checking his phone records. No more pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. Just silence, and the certain knowledge that she had done the right thing. Victoria closed her eyes and thought about what Robert Matthews had said to her at lunch, about seeing 3 moves ahead. She had anticipated Michael's reaction. She had prepared for this moment. She had controlled the situation instead of letting it control her. That was power. That was agency. That was who she was. The next morning, Victoria woke at her usual time, 6 o'clock in the morning, and went through her normal routine. Shower, coffee, review her calendar for the day. She had a deposition at 10 o'clock and a client meeting at 2. Life went on. Work continued. The world didn't stop because her marriage had ended. She was sitting at the kitchen table with her coffee and her laptop when Michael came downstairs, looking like he hadn't slept at all. He poured himself coffee and sat across from her, and for a moment, it was almost like any other morning from their 12 years together, except everything was different. "I'm moving out," he said. "I'll find a hotel today and start looking for an apartment. You can have the house." "That's generous of you," Victoria said, "considering I'm the one who put the down payment on it with money from my signing bonus at the firm. The house is in both our names, but I have documentation showing my larger financial contribution. My lawyer will be asking for it in the divorce settlement. I'm not going to fight you on anything. You can have whatever you want. What I wanted was a faithful husband and a strong marriage. Since I can't have that, I'll settle for a fair division of assets and a clean break." Victoria took a sip of her coffee. "I've already contacted my attorney. He'll be sending you paperwork within the week. I'm asking for an uncontested divorce on the grounds of adultery. Given the evidence I have, I don't think you'll want to contest it." "I won't." Michael looked down at his coffee cup. "For what it's worth, you were right about everything. About Amanda. About the arrangement. About what I really wanted. I was selfish and stupid, and I destroyed the best thing in my life because I was too immature to appreciate what I had. That's probably the most honest thing you've said in 6 months. Will you ever forgive me?" Victoria considered the question carefully. "Someday, maybe. Not for you, but for me. Because holding on to anger would give you power over my future, and I'm not willing to do that. But forgive you in the sense of reconciliation, of trying again? No, Michael. Never. What you did showed me who you really are, and I believe people when they show me that." They sat in silence for a few more minutes, and then Michael stood. "I'll pack some things and be gone by this afternoon. I'll coordinate with you about picking up the rest of my belongings." "That's fine. Leave your key on the counter when you go." He nodded and left the kitchen, and Victoria heard him climbing the stairs to pack. She returned her attention to her laptop, reviewing her notes for the deposition. She had a job to do, a career to maintain, a life to live. Michael's betrayal didn't change any of that. If anything, it clarified what really mattered. Her phone buzzed with a text from Robert Matthews. "Heard you won't be in until this afternoon. Everything okay?" She smiled slightly and typed back. "Everything's fine. Personal matter resolved. See you at the deposition. Need anything?" "No, I've got it handled." And she did. She had handled it with precision and strategy, with strength and dignity. She had faced the worst moment of her marriage and come through it on her own terms. That counted for something. 3 months later, Victoria sat in her office on the 23rd floor of the downtown building that housed her law firm, looking out over the city as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and pink. The divorce had been finalized 2 weeks ago, quick and clean, just as she had predicted. Michael hadn't contested anything. He had signed whatever papers were put in front of him, accepted the division of assets her lawyer proposed, and moved out of her life with surprising efficiency. The house was hers. The savings account they had built together was split fairly, though Victoria's contributions had been larger. Michael kept the family business, and Victoria kept her law firm and her career. It was all very civilized and businesslike, which somehow made it sadder than if they had fought. She hadn't seen him since he moved out that morning after Amanda left. All communication had gone through lawyers. She had heard through mutual acquaintances that he was dating again. Different women, nothing serious. The pattern continued. Some people never learned. Victoria had thrown herself into work with renewed intensity, taking on challenging cases and winning them with the same precision she had applied to dismantling her marriage. Her reputation had only grown stronger. Clients sought her out specifically because they knew she was brilliant, strategic, and unshakable under pressure. What they didn't know was that every victory in the courtroom felt like a small redemption, proof that she was more than the woman whose husband had betrayed her. But today was different. Today, Victoria was leaving the office early for the first time in 3 months. She had somewhere to be, something important that had nothing to do with billable hours or legal strategy. Her phone buzzed with a text from Robert Matthews. "Ready for tonight? I'm proud of you, you know." Victoria smiled and typed back, "As ready as I'll ever be. Thank you for everything." Robert had been her rock through the divorce, offering wisdom and support without judgment. He had reminded her that endings were also beginnings, that loss created space for something new. She hadn't believed him at first, but slowly, painfully, she was starting to understand what he meant. She packed her briefcase, straightened her desk, and took the elevator down to the parking garage. Her car was waiting, and she drove through the early evening traffic toward the community center on the east side of town. It was a neighborhood she didn't usually visit, working class and diverse, full of families struggling to make ends meet. 6 weeks ago, she had received a call from the director of the center, a woman named Patricia Torres, who had gotten Victoria's name from a referral network for pro bono legal services. The center was being threatened with closure due to a zoning dispute. A developer wanted to buy the building and turn it into luxury condos. The families who relied on the center for after-school programs, job training, and community support would have nowhere to go. Patricia had explained all of this in a voice that was tired but determined, and something in Victoria had responded to that determination. She had taken the case without hesitation. For 6 weeks, Victoria had worked evenings and weekends researching zoning laws, filing motions, gathering evidence of the center's community impact. She had discovered irregularities in the developer's proposal, conflicts of interest in the zoning board, environmental concerns that had been overlooked. She had built a case brick by brick, and today there had been a hearing. Today, the zoning board had ruled in favor of the community center. The building was safe. The programs would continue. Families would still have a place to turn when they needed help. Patricia was waiting for her in the center's main hall, which had been decorated with balloons and handmade signs thanking Victoria for her work. Children were running around playing, parents were setting out food for a celebration, and the noise and energy were a sharp contrast to the quiet elegance of Victoria's law office. "You came!" Patricia exclaimed, pulling Victoria into a tight hug. "I wasn't sure you would. I know how busy you are." "I wouldn't miss this," Victoria said, and meant it. This victory felt different from her courtroom wins. This felt personal and meaningful in a way that corporate mergers and contract disputes never had. A little girl, maybe 7 years old, ran up to Victoria and thrust a drawing into her hands. "I made this for you. Miss Patricia said you saved our center." The drawing showed a stick figure woman in a red dress standing in front of a building with a big heart drawn over it. "Thank you," the crayon letters said at the bottom. Victoria felt her throat tighten with emotion. "This is beautiful," she managed. "Thank you so much. I'm going to hang this in my office." The little girl beamed and ran off to rejoin her friends. Patricia smiled. "You've made a real difference here. These families, they don't have much, but this center gives them hope, gives their kids a safe place to go. You gave us that future back." "I just did what any lawyer would do," Victoria said, uncomfortable with the praise. "No," Patricia corrected gently. "You did what a good person does. You saw people who needed help, and you helped them, even though there was no money in it for you, even though you had your own struggles to deal with. That's not just being a lawyer. That's being human. Victoria stayed for an hour, eating potluck food and listening to parents tell her what the center meant to them. A single mother who relied on the after-school program so she could work her evening shift. An older man who had learned English there after immigrating 5 years ago. A teenager who was planning to be the first in her family to go to college thanks to the tutoring program. Each story was a reminder that the law wasn't just about contracts and corporations. It was about protecting people, about fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. When Victoria finally left, driving back toward her quiet house in her quiet neighborhood, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Purpose. Not the hollow satisfaction of winning a case for a wealthy client, but the deep fulfillment of knowing she had used her skills to make a real difference. She pulled into her driveway and sat in the car for a moment, looking at the house that was now just hers. It didn't feel lonely tonight. It felt peaceful. She had planted new flowers in the garden last weekend, bright yellow daisies that brought cheerfulness to the space. She had rearranged the furniture in the living room, getting rid of pieces that reminded her too much of Michael and bringing in new ones that reflected only her taste. She had painted the master bedroom a soft blue-gray that made her feel calm. Slowly, she was making the house her own, filling it with her choices, her preferences, her life. Inside, Victoria changed out of her work clothes into comfortable pants and a sweater. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat in her favorite chair by the window, the one that looked out over the garden. The drawing from the little girl at the community center was already on her refrigerator, held up by a magnet shaped like a scales of justice that Robert had given her when she made partner. Her phone rang. It was her sister, Emily, calling from across the country. "Hey, how did the hearing go?" "We won," Victoria said, unable to keep the smile out of her voice. "The center is safe." "That's amazing. I'm so proud of you. Are you celebrating?" "I just came from a party at the center. It was wonderful. All these families thanking me, kids showing me their artwork. It reminded me why I went to law school in the first place. Not for the corporate mergers," Emily teased gently. "Definitely not for the corporate mergers." Victoria took a sip of wine. "I've been thinking about making some changes at the firm. Maybe taking on more pro bono work. Maybe shifting my focus toward cases that actually matter to real people instead of just shuffling money between corporations." "That sounds like a good plan. How are you doing otherwise?" "Really doing?" Victoria considered the question honestly. "I'm okay. Some days are harder than others. Sometimes I still get angry about what Michael did, about the time I wasted on him, but mostly I just feel relieved. Relieved that I found out who he really was before I wasted any more years. Relieved that I don't have to pretend anymore." "Have you thought about dating again?" "Not even a little bit," Victoria laughed. "I'm focusing on me right now, on figuring out who I am outside of being Michael's wife, on building the kind of life I actually want, instead of the one I thought I was supposed to want." They talked for another 20 minutes, about Emily's kids and their upcoming visit, about their mother's health, about everything and nothing. When Victoria hung up, she felt connected and supported in a way she hadn't appreciated before. She had been so focused on her marriage, on making it work, that she had let other relationships drift. She was reclaiming those connections now, rebuilding her support system. The next morning, Victoria woke early and went for a run, something she had started doing after the divorce. The physical exertion helped clear her mind, and she enjoyed the quiet of the early morning streets. When she returned home, she showered and dressed for work, choosing a deep blue suit that made her feel powerful and confident. At the office, Robert was waiting with coffee and a stack of files. "I heard about yesterday. The whole firm is talking about how you took down that developer. The center deserved to stay open. It was the right thing to do. It was also brilliant legal work. You found angles nobody else saw." Robert handed her one of the files. "Which is why I want to talk to you about something. The firm is expanding our public interest division. We need someone to head it up, someone who understands both the business side and the social impact side. Someone who can win cases that matter. Victoria opened the file, scanning the details. It would mean a shift in her practice. Fewer corporate clients and more community organizations, nonprofits, individuals who needed help but couldn't afford traditional legal fees. It would probably mean less money, at least initially. But it would mean work that felt meaningful, cases that made a difference. "I want to do it," she said without hesitation. "When do I start?" "Immediately, if you're ready. We've already got a backlog of potential cases. Housing discrimination, employment disputes, environmental justice issues. Real problems that need someone with your skills and determination." Victoria felt a surge of excitement that had nothing to do with billable hours or partnership bonuses. This was what she had been missing, this sense of purpose and meaning. "I'm ready." The rest of the day flew by in a flurry of meetings and planning sessions. Victoria dove into the new cases with enthusiasm, her mind already strategizing and analyzing. By the time she left the office that evening, she was energized rather than exhausted. As she drove home, Victoria thought about the woman she had been 3 months ago, standing in her kitchen while her husband introduced his mistress. That woman had been hurt and betrayed, but she had also been strong enough to turn the situation to her advantage. She had given Michael exactly what he asked for and shown him how bankrupt his desires really were. She had protected herself, gathered evidence, and managed her divorce with the same skill she brought to her legal practice. But more importantly, that night had shown Victoria who she really was. Not just Michael's wife, not just a successful lawyer, but a woman who could face betrayal and humiliation and still maintain her dignity. A woman who could turn pain into power. A woman who could rebuild her life according to her own values and priorities. 6 months ago, if someone had told Victoria that her husband would have an affair and ask for a second wife, she would have been devastated. She would have thought it was the worst thing that could happen to her. Now, driving through the city as the lights came on against the darkening sky, she understood something profound. Michael's betrayal hadn't destroyed her. It had freed her from a marriage that wasn't really working, from a partner who didn't value her, from a life that looked perfect on the outside, but felt hollow on the inside. Freed her to discover what she really wanted, what really mattered, who she really was, when nobody else's expectations shaped her choices. Michael had asked for a second wife, and he had gotten exactly that for 24 hours. In those 24 hours, he had lost everything that mattered. His marriage, his mistress, his self-respect. He had discovered that his fantasy couldn't survive contact with reality, that the thrill he sought was inseparable from the secrecy and taboo he had now destroyed. And Victoria? She had discovered that she was stronger than she had ever imagined, that she could face the worst and come through it with grace, that she could use her pain to fuel positive change, both in her own life and in the lives of others, that she didn't need a husband to be complete, didn't need anyone's validation to know her worth. She pulled into her driveway as the last light faded from the sky. The house glowed warmly from within, the lights she had left on welcoming her home, her space, her life. She grabbed her briefcase and the files for her new cases, already thinking about strategy, about how she could help the families and individuals who were counting on her. Inside, Victoria made herself dinner, a simple pasta dish that she ate while reviewing case files at the kitchen table. The little girl's drawing was still on her refrigerator, the stick figure in the red dress standing proudly in front of the building she had saved. Victoria smiled at it, remembering the child's excited face, the gratitude in Patricia's eyes, the realization that her skills could be used for something genuinely good. Later, as she got ready for bed, Victoria caught sight of herself in the bathroom mirror. She looked the same as she had 6 months ago, but she felt completely different, stronger, clearer, more herself. The woman in the mirror had been tested. and had proven her mettle. She had faced betrayal with intelligence and strategy. She had turned humiliation into empowerment. She had rebuilt her life on her own terms. Victoria thought about Amanda sometimes, wondering if the young woman had learned anything from that disastrous evening. She hoped so. She hoped Amanda would be more careful about whose promises she believed, about what situations she allowed herself to be pulled into. She held no ill will toward the girl. Amanda had been a symptom, not the disease. The disease had been Michael's selfishness, his entitlement, his belief that he deserved everything without earning it. As for Michael, Victoria rarely thought about him anymore. When she did, it was with a kind of detached curiosity about what he might be doing, how he might be justifying his choices to himself. She didn't hate him. Hate required too much energy, too much ongoing emotional investment. She had simply moved on, closing that chapter of her life and opening a new one. Victoria climbed into bed, into the space that was now entirely hers, and felt a sense of peace settle over her. Tomorrow she would start working on cases that mattered. Tomorrow she would continue building the life she actually wanted, instead of the one she had settled for. Tomorrow she would wake up as herself, fully and completely, with no apologies and no regrets. Her husband had asked for a second wife, and in doing so he had given Victoria the greatest gift imaginable. He had shown her that she didn't need him, that she was capable of standing alone, that her strength came from within, not from any relationship or role or expectation. She had given him his wish for 24 hours, and in those 24 hours, she had reclaimed her power, her dignity, and her future. Michael had lost everything. Victoria had gained herself, and as she drifted off to sleep in her peaceful house in her quiet neighborhood, Victoria smiled, because she knew something Michael would probably never understand. True power wasn't about controlling others or having everything you wanted. True power was knowing your worth and refusing to accept anything less than you deserved. True power was walking away from what hurt you and toward what healed you. Michael had asked for a second wife. He got two for 24 hours. And then he got exactly what he deserved. Nothing. Victoria got something far more valuable. She got her life back. And this time, she was going to live it on her own terms. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.